So thank you all for being willing to participate in this debrief. And Roberta, I want to start with you and ask you to compare what it was like to be coached by these three different coaching approaches, I guess I would call them.
Okay. Again, I didn't take any notes because I was too busy talking, so I can give you broad strokes. Yours was the most frustrating because it was so amorphous, and I kept feeling like you were asking questions, but I was doing all the work. And the questions that you were asking, some of them were affective and not helpful. And maybe that's me. I don't want to talk about affect, but there's only a limited value in talking about affect here. The woman was being a pain in the neck. And I didn't have a sense that that you were going to help me make a plan. And so the burden of planning was mine. In your case, I felt more structure, but there must have been something that you said that made me come up with that bad boy chair, because that is one of the metaphors in my life. Not that I've ever used one. I've seen one that has to do with disciplining bad behavior. So something about the way you asked me questions made me think that I was remiss if I didn't discipline this woman because she had really misbehaved, and that if I didn't let her know who was boss, that was going to have redound to my leadership credibility. You got to let those suckers know that you're the boss here. And so that's a struggle for me in terms of, number one, I don't do conflict well, so that may be an issue for my leadership. And it isn't, as I said, it isn't the value I want to, I don't want to be the Queen of Hearts. And so that's, that this conversation raised that question for me. And maybe you wanted me to see more than that. But you did at least send me home with some plans, which, you're going to talk to the lady and you're going to try to do something and this is what you're going to do. But I felt right from the get-go that you had this idea about what I should be doing that wasn't something I was able to live up to. And in your case, you had a quality of empathy in just the way you interacted with me, which does not suggest that they did not have it, but there's something qualitatively different about the way you were looking and listening that engaged me differently right from the beginning. Maybe it's a setup. I mean, I knew what the three pieces were supposed to be. And you were the person, of course, maybe our cameraman could have got me there too, because you asked me some questions that I hadn't thought about. She derailed me right from the beginning, and I think I was set up to think that way, perhaps because of the way that, however brief scenario was written, but this person's behavior in that meeting room derailed me, and so I just deferred it and said, I need time to think about this and come back and figure out what I want to do. Give me the time, folks, and I will come back and we'll deal with this. You made me think right away, was that an opportunity missed in the room to engage the whole group in the conversation about what do we think about that? So open it up and see what other folks thought.
Interesting, I wasn't even going there.
But that's what I thought when you asked. I don't know where you were going, but that's what I thought. And yet, of course, to me, when I say it, I thought, that's pretty risky, and I don't know that I would have been brave enough to do that, because you might have gotten way more than you asked for. So, and you were the one who was able to help me come up with the most structured plan. You were very structured about it. Tell me again, what are you going to do by the next time? What are some actual limited, concrete steps you can take? Because you know me, I got a theory of action, I've got some lofty goals. I can envision where we need to go and the connection between 1, 2, and ultimately 3, 4, and 5. But you rolled it back and said, well, let's scale that down, Roberta. Let's see what's the next step for the next meeting. And how can you connect that to the larger one, but come up with a concrete plan and something you're going to do before you come back to meet with me in 2 weeks. So that was helpful. But there was a quality of empathy that you communicate that was powerful to me, that made me feel okay right from the get-go. You made me feel like, kick him in the butt, lady, or you're not worth your salt. And you just made me feel like...
Well, that's so interesting, because I'm the one that asked all these affective questions. So how come that doesn't translate into empathy?
it probably wasn't empathy that I was looking for, although I was getting it here. That empathy wasn't an end product for me. It simply enabled me to know that there was a quality of listening, which of course you were listening just as hard, I'm sure. I don't know. I had the sense that you would keep coming back to ask questions about affect around the whole situation that felt to me at some point, if we're not end stop but limited, that more questions in that zone were not going to be useful to me in terms of how do I feel, or how do I think she feels, or what the feelings were around what was happening. Yes, I did feel pissed at her, I did. And she's probably pissed at me, and I probably need to find out why. But I don't know that it's a more complex set of feelings than that. Maybe it is. I don't know, but do we need to do an immunity change around these feelings? I don't know.
I just think it's such an interesting point, because I think when most people talk about empathy, the things that people would list as the behaviors that demonstrate empathy are the behaviors that I demonstrated.
Tell me what those are.
So reflective listening, right? So I did a lot of, trying to use your words and trying to draw out meaning and make sure that, you understood, that I was trying to understand what you were feeling mostly. And I think most people would characterize that as empathy. But what you got from Richard was different.
Right. Richard did some of those very same things. He restated. He let me know that he had heard what I said. He paraphrased. He tried to give names to some of my feelings. He questioned me about, how do you feel about that? He did some of those very same things. There was a quality of visual attention that you presented right from the beginning that had some resonance to me. I don't know why. And it wasn't that I didn't get visual attention from either one of you. It's not a pejorative comment about the other two coaches. There was something about it that made me feel he was with me in a way. I don't know if empathy is the right word for that. Present in a way.
So what do you make of that?
What do you make of that?
I don't know. It's hard to say. I mean, we've had this conversation quite often. There was a practice that I was going for that I'm not sure was tied. I mean, the connecting with the client piece is something I think I would have been trying to do in either of these, and I'm not sure. I mean, I was cognizant a few minutes in that you and I were really dialed in visually with one another, and I'm not sure. I mean, I do try to lean in, but in terms of practice, I also wonder. You're someone who was getting a bit frustrated with that. Let's stop talking affect. Let's just get to it.
This one frustrated
I
me.
wonder if being given the space to find your own answers gave you a different kind of power and mitigated frustration that you would have been having.
Well, I didn't feel in this conversation that you had some sort of schema from which you were operating. You might have, but I couldn't feel it. Whereas I felt you had one, yeah. And that I wasn't, and that you were reaching around a zone of questioning that may or may not have been where I wanted to go, or use of as much utility as perhaps you thought it was to me. Some I wouldn't discount it, but I didn't want to go as far there as you wanted me to. He gave me more room to go wherever I wanted to go.
But I clearly had a schema. I mean, it was a bit content neutral, but I had in my head, okay, what's the goal? What's the problem Roberta is trying to solve? What's the frame that she's giving to this problem? What are the assumptions embedded in that frame, and how do those limit how she makes sense of the frame? What's the goal she wants out of this, solving this problem? What are the possible strategies for tackling this? Again, what are the assumptions embedded within this?
But content neutral. It wasn't leaning heavily on, you were leaning heavily on a kind of establish your credibility as a principle, and you were leaning heavily on unpacking the affective zones that contribute to the behaviors that we can see.
Right.
You weren't leaning heavily on any specific content, which gave me the freedom, I think, to go within my own schema where I was going. Now, if it were wrong or crazy, or you thought that it was a stupid thing to do, I don't know what you would have done, maybe something different. But to let me go and try to structure me, or offer some structure with the questions, which is, what are you going to do next? What would that look like? What do you think it might look like? What's your goal? You know, those are structural questions, but I get to create the answer. So, and yeah. And you do visually engage in a way that's pretty powerful. Yeah.
So 3 different schemata, right? Outcome, and not only outcome, but
My way.
her outcome,
Judge-
right?
judgment.
So, and
My
You were
outcome.
very nice about it.
she was very nice about
But
it.
she made me feel like a wimp. You what kind of wimp are you, lady? You can't go
So
kick butt.
this is the expert stance,
She's the
right?
kick butter.
And mine too is content neutral, in that I don't have a particular outcome, but I also don't have a process for direction, right?
Right.
All I have is affect, empathy, listening.
Repeating.
The same
Rinse
things
and
over
repeat,
I know,
right?
I know. It was actually incredibly hard to do. I don't know how I lasted 20 minutes. Honestly, that was really, really difficult.
Why was it so hard?
And that, huh?
Why is that? Why was it so hard? Because it doesn't go anywhere.
Because it doesn't go. So there were questions. So you were going someplace despite me, right?
I
So
hope
then
so. For the first time in my life, Isabel, let it be noted.
So for the purposes of this role play, it was trying to really demonstrate that you can do what it says in those chapters that we read on questioning and listening. You can do all those things, and the conversation can go nowhere. And what you did was actually talk yourself through it anyway. And so it's actually kind of interesting because your outcome was not really, from my perspective, distinguishable one from the other.
Right.
But for you, the experience was
Right.
very different. And for someone
Right.
who was less able to, in a sense, coach themselves than you, then it really wouldn't have gone anywhere. But someone could have walked out feeling like my coach really understands me. You know, I'm
So what?
right.
But in some ways, this coaching, just by the artificial nature of the way you structure this, I rehearsed 3 times. You gave me 3 lesson plans.
Right. Mhm.
She got me started thinking about it, and you did raise the whole question for me about wimphood. You know, what do? You raised questions that I hadn't thought about, which is how do you establish credibility? And you made me think about that whole question, which is in establishing credibility, I want to model the values and the assumptions that are important to me about how I am. If I beat you and put you in the bad boy chair, then you know what kind of principle you got.
Yeah.
That's not such a good thing from my book.
Right.
So I rehearsed, and certain things, I got to articulate certain things 3 times. So it got better, as it were. It got to a more polished plan, as it were, not better. But in part because I'd rehearsed it 3 times. You already
You
surfaced all
loosen
the.
the jar.
That's right.
Loosen the jar.
Yes. That's right. You already surfaced all
May
the.
that always be my role. So it was also fun watching the 2 of you compete for airspace.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if you noticed, but you just were talking faster and faster the whole way through. It was really kind of cute.
Because I had the feeling that I wasn't going where you wanted me to go, and boy,
Right.
you wanted to make sure that
I
I went
did.
there. Yeah.
I did.
Was it fun?
It was fun. It was hard though because this one is like, well, that's not what I want to do. I mean, so she knew what she wanted to do. She knew what she needed to do. I need to talk to this person. That's not my style. I kind of want to do it this way. And so it was hard. So how do you coach somebody out of their thinking into your thinking, even when you don't believe in your thinking? It was
But I
it was
didn't
fun.
know what I wanted to do. I came into this.
You knew what you didn't want to do.
Yeah,
That's-
you made me
you
think
knew
about
what you
that right
didn't
away.
wanna
I
do.
don't want to do that. Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, that's correct.
So I came into this trying to flesh out
Yeah.
what I thought, enough specifics so we had a real case more than I had been given. But I didn't give a lot of thought to what this. I knew I wrote down what do I want from the coaching. I have things what I hoped the coaching was going to give me. I need a plan for reining her in. I need damage control. I need this. But I didn't know what that would look like. I hadn't thought about what the action steps would be. So these 3 conversations in succession helped me get there.
Anything else?
Good coaching,
I
guys.
just found myself wondering if
Roberta had been a more novice principal, even one shy to be forceful, whether you would have been able to push back as hard on Carrie. If you're a second year principal, first year principal, and someone who's a senior mentor saying, you got to squash this.
Yeah.
You have to squash this.
Yeah.
Even if it would make you feel uncomfortable style-wise, I wonder if you'd have been as ready to say, no, that's not who I am, that's not how I want to be, it's not the culture I want to build.
Yep.
And then I just raise it because I think that
It's a good question.
part of what's happening on this side is about the interaction between what's happening on this side and what happens on this side that produces something in the middle.
I think that's right. That's a good question, right? But I didn't know I felt that way. You raised that whole zone about how you discipline misbehaviors. And you raised the question about maybe she's not misbehaving. Maybe it's something else. I don't know.
Yeah.
That was the one question that really got you to stop.
Right, right. He was the one who got me to stop and think about what's really going on. I don't really know what's going on. And you were the one that got me to what he got to right away, which is why don't you just talk about it at the table?
Really, those 3 coaching sessions really worked well for him too.
There's your coach.
Go to
Behind
the cameraman every time. He sees it all, right? Thank you so much. I learned from this. Have you ever had anybody like that in real life?
Like, I haven't, but I've interviewed a lot of people in role plays who jump across the table to tell you exactly what you should do. They tell you what you should say. I even had one principal who, in that scenario, said, you know what, I'll have that conversation with you. Do you want me, in fact, why don't I have the conversation for you and model for you? I mean, so just even beyond
Actually, the question
telling
I
me
meant
what to
was,
do, offering to do it for me.
haven't you had to solve problems like this with pain in the butt people on your
Right.
leadership team?
Right. Yeah, so
Anything else?
nothing else.
Anything
Good
else?
stuff.
Yeah, ma'am.
Good job,
That was
Isabel.
fun.
Good day.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.